am.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm joined today with Derek Smart, game developer and panelist at SPJ Airplay. How you doing, Derek?
I'm good, my man. How about you?
Not too bad. For the audience watching, we're probably going to go about a half hour. Derek's a very busy man, and then he'll send me the question list, his answers at some point. No rush, and I'll add those to the book. So if you want to see all of his answers and all of his thoughts on GamerGate, then check it out in the book. So Derek, you have been a game developer since I believe the late 80s or early 90s. Is that right?
Late 80s.
You started out, you cut your teeth in the Usenet days. You used to post about your game, 3000 AD, talk about the development of the game and what your plans were for it. This got you a little bit of a reputation as a game developer who was willing to interact with people, people who were critics, people who were fans, a large number of people. Um, and your 3000 AD originally, I believe the publisher actually pushed the game out sooner than you would have liked. Is that right in the original release?
Yeah, that's correct. It's one of those things where, they had to meet the year-end quota kind of thing. And at the time, we didn't realize that they were also trying to go public. So the game wasn't finished, and they decided to push it out during that October Christmas season. And of course, you know the rest. The rest is history. It's just one of those things that you can never get past. But that's basically what happened.
Okay. And then you decided that you wanted to go back. The initial product was a bit poorly received. Um, you wanted to go back and actually correct it and re-release the game in a state that you felt like it was meant to be. And
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. What I did was because I had release rights for the game, I just got together my attorneys and we reached out to Ryan Brandt, who's now deceased. He was the CEO of Take Two at the time, and we made him a deal. We said, hey, listen, I don't want this to be a big legal mess. I just want the rights back to my game, and so I can go do what I want to do with it. So after some back and forth, we reached a settlement. Of course, I can't go into any details about that, but the settlement ended up with me having back the rights to my game. And because they'd already, sold some rights in different territories around the world, the first thing I did was I released it for free and continued working on it for about a few months. Released it for free, and then later on, about almost a year and a half later, when it was finished the way I wanted it to, I connected with Interplay, and they checked out the game and ended up. It was actually a re-release called Battlecruiser 3080 version 2.0, and that came out 2 years later in the form that I originally wanted it to in '96, and it did pretty well. And the funny thing is, a lot of people don't know this, is that the original game made a ton of money. You can actually go online right now on the SEC website and pull up the filing papers for Take Two. My game is one of three games in there. You can just search for Battle Cruiser, pull it up. My game was one of three games that actually helped them go public. So in a way, you can say that I helped build Take Two, as it were. A lot of people don't really know that.
all right, and then you started your own company, 3000 AD, where you make games set in the same universe. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually formed the studio in 1992 because it was my first game, and for legal protection and the whole taxing and all this stuff. So 3008 itself was formed in Florida in '92, and Battlecruiser 3000 AD was the first game, and I've since developed a series of games using the same IP and done other different game styles like FPS, space combat, RTS, all within the same um, 3080 type IP and world and environment, but from different game genres.
Now, fast forward a little bit. It's 2015. Well, actually, I guess I'll ask. Gamergate happens August 2014. What are your initial thoughts of this controversy?
Oh, well, basically, I thought the whole thing was a farce to start off with because, once the media started, you know, casting gamers, in the same poor light as, a bunch of online nutcases who, just took one ball and ran down with it. And a lot of people kept pinging me because, I mean, you probably know this, your listeners and the viewers probably know this. I always say I'm a gamer first and foremost. I'm a game developer second. So, you know, a lot of people tend not to, get the distinction correct because back in the day, most of the game developers really weren't entirely indie because you had to always toe the corporate line. There was always publisher distributors involved. I've always gone my own way and done my own thing. And so when Gamergate happened, and a lot of people started reaching out to me, wanting to get my opinions, and I took a look at it, talked to some friends. It occurred to me that the whole thing was just, aside from the whole mess that it was, my particular issue with the whole Gamergate thing was the fact that they were casting all gamers of all types, which would have included myself in a poor light, and that's why I got involved because I wanted for the people who buy my games, the gamers who buy my games, the developers who I'm friends with and who I've known for years and years and years. I wanted them to understand my position, and that I really didn't buy into that whole narrative, and it had nothing to do with gamers per se, but just a bunch of people who usurped the entire thing and made it their own, and they went downhill from there.
Now, when you say that they were portraying gamers in a negative light, who was doing the portraying?
Well, it's been such a long time, but I really can't go into specifics because my memory is not what it used to be. But particularly, most of the online noise in social media, even by some people in the press, um, a lot of people will take something somebody said or wrote completely out of context. And because, a lot of people were heated up at the time and there's a lot of controversy, a lot of strings pulling, I even had friends in the media who were unfairly attacked over that whole thing because they dared to speak up and say something and give an opinion. So for me, it was just basically, it was the both sides kind of thing, but it's not the thing where you would say, yeah, both sides are good people, so everybody was wrong. No, I mean, it was easy if you were paying attention. It was easy enough to see who the bad actors were, and it was also easy to see who the actors were who were actually standing on the fence and saying one thing in private and saying another thing in public. So it was really a bunch of people from both sides. The issue is the loudest people made the loudest noise, and that's what carried and fanned the flame. So it's really hard to pinpoint any one person or section of people. And even if I remembered, I wouldn't. It's not something I would do either. I don't call out people like that.
Did you publicly speak about Gamergate prior to Michael Koretsky approaching you?
I did. It's actually my Twitter feed. It was actually we were having discussions about it on something awful on a few other forums, and I actually did a lot more of my exchange on Twitter, and I believe that's how Michael saw my input and approached me to be on that conference session.
And so Michael reaches out to you, and you agree to do it. There's two journalists, Lynn Walsh from the Society of Professional Journalists, who later became the president, and Rin Laforme from the Poynter Institute. And you're there as a third person on the neutral side, I guess you could say, the neutral panel, to try and understand what Gamergate is and try and bridge the gap between journalists and gamers, or gamers who supported Gamergate, rather. You're the only game developer there. Did Michael tell you why he wanted to have a game developer present?
Yeah, because he wanted a game developer who would be able to be neutral and who would be able to be objective in speaking out, not only on behalf of gamers but also on behalf of game devs. not that I was speaking for everybody, I was speaking for myself, but particularly I wanted to have my thoughts known, and Michael just wanted me. He just felt that I was neutral and unbiased enough to be able to carry that. And I mean, a lot of people know that. You probably know that about me. A lot of people know that about me. I tend to be very fair and unbiased, and I'm very passionate about things that I believe and care about. So that's one of the reasons why he approached me. I didn't even have to think twice about it.
So some people who were approached for airplay turned down the invitation to participate. Mostly people who were critical of the GamerGate movement, like Stephen Totillo, they seemed to view participating as basically giving cover to the bad actors who they perceived as being only on the pro Gamergate side or mostly on the pro Gamergate side. Did you have any concerns that you would be perceived as taking a side by attending this conference?
I did not, because again, my reputation is one in which people always trust me to be, on point, unbiased, truthful to the best of my abilities, and I don't pick sides when it comes to things like that. So, for me, I understand why those guys didn't do it, but you have to also understand that those guys are in a different, what's the word I'm looking for? They're in a different caste, as it were. They're in a different, environment, in different groups, in different circles. They have friends on not only on the media side but also in gaming, and it's really difficult when you are in this position as much as GamerGate blew up to have to then go and be able to speak about anything, even on your own behalf, without fear of saying the wrong thing that's going to be a soundbite or somebody's byline or a lead in the magazine. So I do understand why they didn't want they hesitated to do it. I mean, for me, I didn't really care because I'm not beholden to anyone. I don't have publishers that are going to cancel me. I don't have distributors who I have to answer to. I don't answer to anybody. I answer to the gamers that buy my games, and I answer to the guys who work for me. So for me, it was easy, and I also knew that you know whatever I said would have enough credibility for people to understand that Derek Smart's not the kind of guy who's just going to go waffle or pick sides or try to be diplomatic is just not my style. But I understand why some people didn't want to do it. For me, it was a non-issue, and I would do it all over again if the
And
chance came. In fact,
I should qualify real quick. I don't know, just for the audience, I don't know why Stephen Totillo did turn it down. I don't think he ever publicly stated the reasoning. Now, the first panel talks about games journalism and issues in that. How do you think that panel went?
um, my memory is not as good as it used to be, but I don't. I think it went well. I think most of the discussions. I don't have the soundbite, but I think somebody has it on YouTube somewhere. But if I remember correctly, I didn't have any particular issues with it. I felt that they were talking about things that were of no consequence and had nothing to do with Gamergate, to be honest. And I think they were more geared towards trying to find or put or punch holes into the narrative that it wasn't just a group of people. It was a bunch of gamers and the media were complicit in this, blah blah blah. But I thought it was okay. I mean, I didn't have anything other than my own personal comments and the fact that I did speak to a lot of people that were there. I thought it went okay. I mean, I mean, it would have it went as best as any sort of controversial event or conference would go, right? I mean, you can never put your finger on any one thing that went right or went wrong. It's just a bunch of people talking and hoping they don't screw up and say the wrong thing.
Now, there's the second panel where the topic, at least in theory, was how can the media cover Gamergate better, or something to that extent. What did you think of that panel with
I thought
Milo,
it was
Kathy
okay.
Young, and Christine Summers?
Yeah, I think it went well, but we didn't actually get too much into it before the bomb threat got called in, if you remember, because it took place here in Miami, and some idiot called in a bomb threat, so the whole thing ended. But I thought, for the most part, I mean, I'm just going to flat out say it. I just think that the people in the panel who were talking in terms of trying to, what's the word I'm looking for? Try to find a bridge between the media and gamers just got it all wrong. They just got gamers wrong completely. You have to be engaged. You have to be a gamer and you have to be in games journalism to actually get the mindset and the culture of gamers. It's not the kind of thing you read about in books. It's not the kind of thing you go to college for. It's not the kind of thing that you have to gain any experience, and you have to be a part of gaming. And it being somebody who was on the sidelines and trying to use a narrative to fit your own for your own, for your own, to suit your own purposes and means never works out well. So I really didn't think, I thought there was a lot of disconnect in that specific panel in terms of trying to figure out how, you know, to blend or to merge or to reconcile the two. I just thought that it was, I mean, I never got to say it because, again, bomb threat, but I just thought that they missed the boat by a mile because nothing really got said that was pertinent to gaming as a culture. You're just talking as if you were talking to a bunch of people in a room, which never works out.
So you say that gamers, you need to be a gamer to really understand the culture. Is there is there no way for a normal, quote unquote, mainstream journalist, say New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, whatever, to cover Gamergate if they themselves aren't a gamer?
Well, it depends. I mean, you don't have in part of an accident to cover a train wreck, right? So it comes with evidence. It comes with the things that you look at. It comes to thing. It comes to what you see and what you perceive, and then you go in and whether you're broadcasting or you are writing, it's your words, it's your interpretation of what you've seen and experienced. Gaming, it's the same way. I can talk to you about a game right now, whether it's, Quake or some game that we play. And unless you actually experience the game itself, it's going to be very hard for you to reconcile what I'm trying to tell you and the experience that I'm having for you to convert that into words. So I think that at the end of the day, yes, you can write about games. Yes, you can write about anything. You don't have to be a party, but you have to have a good understanding of the subject matter. And gaming as a culture is not this sort of subject matter you pick up on the streets or you pick up by talking to people or you pick up by just reading a book. So you have to be part of the culture. You have to be a gamer first and foremost for you to understand anything from the perspective of a gamer, whether it's the culture itself, whether it's the game itself, whether it's what makes them spend money, whether it's what makes them passionate about a game or game developing. You have to understand the culture at a different level for you to be able to cover it, fairly. Because I mean, it's the difference. I mean, even today we talk about fake news. People can draw a line between Washington Post and the New York Times, and then you talk about Fox and all this. There's always that line. It's always about interpretation, and some people want to interpret things the right way, and some people just do a sloppy job of it, and other people have an agenda. If you approach something without an agenda, it's easy enough to be unbiased and be fair, and it gives you a better understanding of the subject. So you have to have a good grounded knowledge of it to be able to articulate your thoughts. And Gamergate was just a misfire by a lot of people in a lot of places, and that's why it just blew up the way it did.
Now, after the bomb threat, some of the panelists decided to continue the conversation outside, and there were even a couple of people in the audience who decided to participate and continued the discussion at a condemned building nearby. Did you decide to join them or participate in those discussions at all after?
I did. I had a few discussions with some people on the panel. I didn't last long because I was more worried about getting out of there. There's lots of traffic, a lot of people milling outside. The police showed up, the fire brigade. So, um, mostly we were talking about what had happened. I don't remember. I don't recall having any meaningful discussion about the panel itself. We were mostly talking about what had happened and how to follow up and what we're going to do. But I don't recall having any meaningful discussions once that bomb threat got called and then we all ended up outside.
Now, you come from a different era of the internet. I guess I do in some ways as well, though I'm a bit younger than you. Um, Part of the conversation about Gamergate, I feel like an undercovered aspect of it is this collision between the old internet and the new. You obviously posted on Usenet. You talked about posting on Something Awful. These are different types of communities than, say, Facebook or Twitter or social media. And I don't. What do you think of like the collision or is there a collision between like the people who've been on the internet for a long time versus a bunch of people? Now everyone's on the internet now, right? Now people who are illiterate are on the internet. So how do we think about the old internet versus the new internet and different norms and cultures colliding?
Well, I don't think. I mean, you have to think it's the difference between old and new, right? I mean, back in the day, very few people could actually get online, let alone have a computer, or let alone understand how to get online. I mean, we're talking days of AOL, we're talking days of Kix, Bix, Usenet, CompuServe. I mean, those were different times, and in those times, you found that it was mostly the elite, the educated, people in, IT people, people in industry that had the knowledge, the expertise, the money, as it were, and the tools to engage in online communities. So when you transition from, go from Usenet to AOL and CompuServe and all those, if you look at the ageism, it's just the time that things happen. It's like going from the new vehicles we had in the in the 40s to the superpowered vehicles we have today. Time passes, people change, things improve or they decline. But I don't think that there's a need to bridge the two because there's no bridge really. It's just people just grow old, you move on. It's just like games. You like you and I were just talking earlier about playing Quake 2. I found that to be surprising because I play Quake 2 once in a while. I play Unreal Tournament once in a while because you know there's always new stuff, and once the new stuff comes in, it gives way it gives way the old stuff gives way to the new stuff. So I think with the communities even now you can go to something awful and you can go to other communities where all the people on Usenet are still around. You can go to quarter to three as well, and it's just a different vibe. But the issue is those communities, even though they have what younger people, younger generation, newer people, it's still us from the old guard that still go to those places. I mean, you can go to something awful right now. In fact, yesterday I was on the phone with Cliffy B, and we were laughing about something awful, and we talked about low tax, and we used to do those comic strips and all that. So it's some of the things that most of us remember, and it comes up, and we all end up in the same community. Quarter to three, something awful, places. So when you talk about those communities, sure, we're still on Twitter, we're still on Facebook, but it's a completely different vibe. I mean, the conversations we have on quarter to three and the craziness we do on something awful, we would never have those on Twitter or Facebook, not in a million years, because again, it's a completely different vibe. And that's one of the things that Cliffy B and I were talking about on the phone yesterday. Um, those days are, they'll never come back, and there's nowhere to replicate them. So it's just a different time now, and most of us got old, and we have a lot of these youngsters sitting on our lawn, and all we can do is just either laugh or yell at them to get off our lawns, and try to blend and merge as best we can. But there's absolutely no way to bridge the two. People just move on.
All right, I've got a few more questions for you. I know I want to be respectful of your time. Um, Derek,
No,
you
I can give you another 15 minutes.
okay? So the Something Awful community, there's a perception that some people have, including some of the people I've interviewed, that some of the trolls were goons, that some of the trolls were posters on Something Awful. Now, obviously, Something Awful is a huge community. Not everybody there's a troll. Not everybody there is anti-GamerGate. It's a diverse group of people. But there's a perception that a lot of the trolling came from the Something Awful community, and even the FBI themselves in their report where they investigated Gamergate, they were following up or investigating a lead where they believed that some members of the Something Awful community were trolling the Gamergate people. And of course, Zoe Quinn herself was a goon, as was Aaron Joney, the guy who wrote the blog post about
Yeah,
his relationship with Zoe Quinn. They were both Something Awful people.
yeah.
What were the conversations like on Something Awful about Gamergate?
Well, to put it in context, it was this all crazy. But to be honest with you, nobody, and it's been a number of years now. I can tell you, Not a single person that I recall ever took any of it seriously. And that's the God's honest truth. And that's just something awful. I mean, I get trolled all the time. I mean, I troll other people sometimes when I feel like it, but then, I got older and that stuff got old. But within the community itself, yes, I mean, you had a bunch of trolls from the goons. You had them all from Twitter and Facebook and elsewhere. It just and even on 4chan. I mean, which where a lot of that crap was going on. The bottom line is this: people don't seem to understand that what, as you mentioned, our community are diverse. It has a diverse and eclectic group of people, and some people just want to have fun. Other people just want to burn the place down. And goons traditionally are just troublemakers. I mean, there's absolutely no way around it. It doesn't matter how serious the conversation is. It only takes one person to send it to send it sideways, and it all goes to hell. So I wasn't particularly surprised about how things turned out. I wasn't particularly surprised that it ended up being, the goons that were singled out as being the trailblazers of the trolling. But to be honest, that's it's unfair in a certain way because the same thing was going on 4chan. I mean, I don't frequent 4chan. In fact, I've been on 4chan for a number of years, and I don't remember the last time I was there. But it was all over the place. It just so happens that when you're looking for a scapegoat, and you happen to see something or hear something somebody said or they wrote something, and then you look at the affiliation, automatically you end up casting this picture. Okay, this is a goon, this is a goon, it's just idiots on something awful, they're responsible for this. And people tend to cling uh, to that narrative. For me, I saw everything that was going on because I know a lot of people. I have a lot of friends in the industry, gamers, people, in media, people who are just gamers, people who are not in gaming or media. I know a lot of people, and a lot of people talk to me because, people like talking to me. So I was privy to a lot of the conversations going on, whether it's on 4chan, whether it's private messages, whether it's on something awful. It just was not one single group of people. I just feel that goons were made the scapegoats, rightfully so to a certain extent. But the whole thing didn't blow up because of goons. The whole thing blew up because a bunch of people found out that it originated from goons in some regard, and they just found a scapegoat and ran with it. But that was not actually the case. It just blew up because the media blew it up, and everyone was looking for a scapegoat, and it wasn't any one person. I mean, you cannot cast an entire community. I mean, I've been on something awful since day one. Does anybody think I'm abusive? I don't think so. Do we have fights and arguments and trolling and being banned, blocked? Of course, we've all been through that. But that doesn't mean that when once there's a controversy that we're involved in, that we want to advocate for people to get harmed, people to get fired, people to lose their livelihood. I mean, that's just nonsense, you know. So, it's just the thing where you can't just say if you walk into a company and you have two hackers there, so all of a sudden the entire company is full of hackers. It doesn't work that way. So for me, I just did not buy into this. That's one of the reasons why I actually went on that SPJ Airplay conference because I wanted to make it known that yes, I am a goon. Yes, I'm old school, and no, not all of us support this crap that's going on. That's the way I see it.
Now, there's also, you talked about the media's coverage of Gamergate and not blaming, that you shouldn't blame an entire group of people. Um, a lot of the coverage about Gamergate in the media and the Wikipedia article about Gamergate make it all about harassment against three people, against Zoe Quinn and Sarkeesian and Brianna Wu, basically. And this is sort of a narrative that the Gamergate community supports harassing these people. In your interactions and your observations, did you believe this to be true?
To a certain extent, of course. I mean, it wasn't like it was something that happened behind doors. Of course, there's a lot of harassment going on. There's a lot of trolling going on, and there's a lot of untoward behavior. I mean, nobody's shying away from that. Nobody is denying any of that. The issue is not about whether it happened. It did happen. I saw it happen. I heard it happen. I read how it happened. It's none of that. It's none of those things. The issue is that because a bunch of people, a group of people did one thing, all of a sudden they cast a whole bunch of people in that same poor light. That's been the issue. I can't imagine anybody would sit down with a straight face and say what happened didn't happen. I mean, that's just nonsense. I mean, of course it happened. We were all there. We saw it happen. And no matter how many times we try to alleviate it, downplay it, step aside, step over it, ignore it, it still happens because there's just some things you can't control. You cannot be responsible for people's behavior the same way you can't be responsible for people's feelings. You can just do what you just do what you can. And unfortunately, a lot of people who tried to do what they could either A, went about it the wrong way and screwed that up, or B, they went about it the right way, but it went against the narrative that was in play. And you have to watch that. And that's the reason why a lot of people just stayed neutral. They didn't do a pro, didn't do a con, didn't say anything about nothing. Because again, you just don't know what you're going to hit and what you're going to get back.
No, I don't obviously I don't support anyone harassing anybody, and I think there were trolls who tried to fuck with people. Though I wouldn't put myself in the none of it happened camp, but I do think that some of the specific claims that were made are not true. Um, because we now have a lot, even at the time we had a lot of evidence too, that some of the specific accusations that people were making, I think, and I'm not gonna like bombard you with specifics on this because obviously you haven't seen it ahead of time, but it does seem like a lot of the stuff that GamerGate got blamed for probably didn't happen. Like one of the people, actually I think probably two of the people who claimed to have fled their homes, that didn't really happen. They didn't flee their homes. That was a lie, it seems. And then like the bomb threats that were called into like Anita Sarkeesian's event, and various GamerGate events. Like I don't, GamerGate got blamed for some of these, but I don't think that there's any evidence that the people who sent the bomb threat into Anita Sarkeesian's college were GamerGate supporters necessarily.
Yeah, I agree with that analysis. And the other thing, in addition to that, is people tend to embellish stuff all the time. Sometimes people do it out of innocence. Some people do it, you know, um, knowingly to blow things up bigger than they were, to play the victim, whatever. I mean, again, there's no doubt that some of the things happened, but by the same token, even the things that didn't happen, a lot of people were so convinced that they happened that others would look at it and go, if all these people think it happened, it must have happened. And that was part of the problem. Because somebody was completely atrocious, outrageous and atrocious. A lot of people just thought, this must be true. Well, if somebody's going to call in a bomb threat, if you hear someone's going to call in a bomb threat and they did call in a bomb threat, and then somebody else says, I had to leave my home because of the bomb threat, you put two and two together, you come up with nine. And that's really what went on. It's just that a lot of things didn't happen, as we come to find out. But a lot of us and others were saying, there's no way this could have happened, blah, blah, blah. And that just got shouted down because, again, once you have a narrative going, nobody wants to take a step back and look at things factually or objectively because when people take sides, very little you can say or do to get them to change their mind or change their sides, and so that narrative's continued. But it was completely ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. And to this day, even the things that weren't true, there's been no consequences. So some people lost their jobs. Some people got harassed for actually saying what at the time we didn't know was the truth, and everything just died out. No consequences at least none that I know of, because again, this is how these things go. That's why a lot of people tend not to engage in controversy, especially in gaming, because you just never know how it's going to go. It's just like how, it's just like, in school or college or wherever or workplace, you got bullied. Eventually, a bully has their own friends, they have their own posse, and, you know, bullying in person is just same as bullying online. Once you get a bunch of people doing the same thing, that's bullying, and it's very hard. to fight against that, besides just keep your mouth shut and just moving away.
You say especially in gaming. Do you think that the gaming community is especially bad, or aspects of it can be especially bad compared to other online discussions or controversies like politics or whatever?
No, I don't think it's a good or bad thing. It's more of a mixture of personalities. I mean, people are who they are. You can have a room full of 10 people and think they're all 10 good people, and you'll just never just there's just that one person who's just not like the other nine. So, gaming is an eclectic culture. So it's no different from you finding good people at work and you find good people in gaming. You find bad people at work, you find bad people in gaming. It's really not a matter of trying to isolate whether, gaming is a bad culture or a good culture. It's just a matter of saying there are good people and there are bad people. But it's never the narrative that, oh yeah, they're all good, they're good people on both sides. That's just nonsense. It's not a matter of whether they're good people or bad people on both sides. It's a matter of who are the good people and who are the bad people. But to say that specific culture or group of people, unless of course there's you're talking about a group of criminals. That's completely different. But when it comes to things like gaming and culture based paradigms, you just cannot use the one brush to paint a whole bunch of people. That's why gaming is gaming. And unfortunately, as you know, when gamers get into controversy, it's basically a matter of bringing the house down because everybody has an opinion. And all those opinions want to bring the house down regardless of consequences. And that's just how gaming works. It's just the personality of people.
Now, people take away a large number of things about Gamergate. You'll get drastically different opinions about how important this was and in what ways it was important. Some people say as wild stuff as that Gamergate caused Trump to be elected, or that it created the rise of the far right, or other people say it wasn't really all that important at all. Maybe some ethical changes happened at some gaming sites. Maybe it had some minor impact here or there, but for the most part, didn't really matter all that much. What do you think? How important was this thing, and in what ways was it important?
Well, it depends on what you deem to be important. I thought the whole media angle, I thought the whole issue regarding the media and how they cover people they know and how they cover whether it's gamers or not, I think that was important. Everything else was just noise. The nonsense about the far right and elections and politics, that's just the noise that comes massively with massive controversies. I mean, you could have a house on fire and running to get your favorite painting, and even with the house on fire, you just think of a million things you want to grab and run outside. So it's the same way. A house on fire is a house on fire, and anybody people who are within the house on fire don't really care that the house is on fire. They just care about what they want to get out of there before the whole thing burns down, or just pour flames. So I don't think it was. I think it just got blown completely out of proportion, and because it was so massive and so loud, and it covered a wide gamut of society, that's how come a bunch of those different sections managed to attribute all their angst and their vitriol towards Gamergate, and before you know it, Gamergate, which was about one thing, ended up being about all these other things that were completely unrelated. And that's the danger of controversy like this. It can get out of hand. It can get a life of its own, and before you know it, it doesn't look like anything like it was when it started. And that's usually how things go, especially when gamers are involved.
Now, one thing, you're a game developer, one thing that a lot of the Gamergate people say that they cared about, myself included, I was one of them, was artistic freedom. There was a perception that some of the so-called social justice people wanted to wanted to create a chilling effect on the industry to make game developers less likely to make the games that they didn't like, that the social justice people didn't like. Did you think that this perception was real? And what do you think of artistic freedom and the state of the industry today in that regard?
Well, I don't think it was real. I think it was misguided. I think game developers will continue to make. I mean, this is a fact because the way we make games, or how we make games, or the kind of games we make, and continue to make, haven't changed since GamerGate. So I think it just goes towards part of what I was saying earlier about a narrative being usurped and other people making it something that it's not. Yes, I mean you always have social justice warriors who have an agenda, um, regardless of what that agenda is. I think the key thing that came out of there are two key things from my perspective that came out of Gamergate that needed to come out. That was one, how the media handles their own ethics is one, which is primary, and second, how we should not tolerate harassment of any kind, whether it's male, female, gamers, media, whatever. Those are the two key things that came out of Gamergate, and I think those are the things that have shaped the online narrative, social discourse since that time, of course, by the people who still remember. So I think a lot of good came out of it, a lot of bad came out of it, but I don't really think that a lot of it had anything to do with, uh, how people, specific set of people thought that we as game developers have to make games that they want to play or games that they like. I mean, that's just nonsense. I mean, of course, again, we're in 2024, we're still making the games we want to make, so that argument went out the window. And I'm really happy that even with all the lip service and all the writings that some of the publishers and the developers tried to make at that time to appease the masses, I'm glad that it all just ended up being lip service and we just ended up making the games we wanted to make for the gamers who buy and play those games and just regard everything else as noise. I mean, it's just entertainment.
So I've got two last questions. I know we're approaching,
Sure.
but I do want to ask. I want to push back a little bit because there were some controversies for sure where game developers did remove content from their games, and I've spoken with a number of developers, both privately and publicly, some of whom don't want to be interviewed because they're afraid. They're afraid of talking about this. They feel like their careers have already been harmed because they expressed opinions that the anti-Gamergate people don't like. Pro Gamergate developers who are terrified of speaking their voice. Um, and some games did have content removed. Like it does seem like the moral panic did have victims. The moral panic against games, I guess. Because like Tim Surrey, for instance, are you familiar with his controversy and how he got attacked, or Troy
Yep.
Levitt?
Yep.
Like,
Yep. I am. And I'm glad you brought that up, but I'll let you finish your train of thought. Carry on.
well, just it does seem like there were very real victims in the industry, and I don't know if Troy Levitt's artistic vision or Tim Surrey's artistic vision was affected specifically. Those weren't really artistic freedom controversies as much, but like
Exactly.
their lives were affected in bad ways.
Right. But that's just, again, I'm glad you brought that up because I would have pointed out that those are all the consequences of the noise. And it's what I mentioned earlier that, you know, you can have a bunch of people who are upset about something. And then somebody decides, if you write a paragraph that, offends a bunch of people and you do realize the paragraph is not offensive, it's a choice you have to make whether you want to modify that paragraph to appease the masses or you want to just leave it alone and take the heat. I do know a lot of well, not a lot. I mean, I could count on one hand the number of games that actually had to do that. There were instances where some content was modified, but let's put it this way. You remember that whole controversy over Overwatch, which was just recent, and that was post Gamergate. People talking about some of the artistic nuances of the content. Those are the things that if somebody says I'm offended by this, and you think whether it's offensive to you or not, it's not relevant. What's relevant is, and this is key, is there's a line between artistic freedom and pushing boundaries. I mean, nobody wants to put porn in a game that's PG-13, do you? I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, you can do it, but who's going to publish your game? You publish it yourself. Everything has consequences. So for me, a result of the GamerGate thing, it just highlighted a bunch of things in games, whether it's content or a narrative, that people felt that, okay, fine, we can modify this or we can change this if they'll just stop yelling at us. I don't think, at least from my recollection, I don't recall anything in any game back then that was offensive to the point that warranted, anything being changed or done a different way and whatever, because it was just a matter of whether or not what artistic freedom means to you. It's just like democracy, right? I mean, democracy is democracy, but democracy has its limits. Artistic freedom has its limits. A lot of people don't know what those limits are, but they're there. Whether they're invisible is not relevant. What's relevant is if somebody says, this is offensive to me, whether you think it's offensive or not is completely irrelevant because that's what tells you what artistic freedom is and what it means. So you have to make a choice. Are you going to retain your artistic freedom or are you going to make changes, change your narrative, change your perspective for the greater good? You have to remember a lot of these things are about money. Where money is involved, you and I both know that decisions get made very, very quickly. If you have a bunch of people making noise about something in a game, or they're saying this is, FJW nonsense, blah blah blah, you have to pick your battles. Remove the content and live to fight another day. Some things are just not worth it. If I make a game today and I get one complaint from anybody that says to me, I find this offensive, I would remove it. The reason is very, very simple. It's not about, capitulating to other people. It's about knowing where the line is because your values are not the same values as other people. And I love the people, and again, I'm speaking from my perspective. I love the people who buy my games. And the reason I've been doing it for 40 years is because the people who buy my games know that one thing about me, I make the games that I want to make and that they want to buy and play. So if they come to me and say, "Hey, I don't like how this looks, or I don't like how this plays, I don't like how," I would make changes if I can. And if I cannot make changes or I don't want to make changes, I explain why it is the way it is. But for me, some battles are just not worth fighting. So yes, there's a lot of noise. In conclusion, there's a lot of noise that happened back then. Some things got changed. I personally don't believe needed to be changed. But when you're talking about money and you're talking about social culture, there's the line, and you have to pick your battles. Do you want to, there's something I always abide by. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? I always choose the path of happiness.
All right, so I do want to follow up on that really quick. For an individual game developer, well, first off, I just want to say, obviously, criticism's okay. I don't have a problem with people criticizing games. Um, I think that well, we could spend like 4 hours talking about like the intricacies of artistic freedom and where the
Yep,
lines are. But so I won't go that route. But I let's just talk about the social culture. At various points in history, there are social cultures that restrict the overton window of what types of art people feel comfortable making. And there are going to be a couple of people around the fringes who say, I don't care what Frederick Wortham and the Comics Code Authority say. I'm going to make my own goddamn comic and I'm going to publish it independent. There's going to be people like that. There's going to be people like that who are standing up against the woke that's the not the woke crusaders, the like the Christian right crusaders in the 80s and 90s, and they're like, well,
right.
fuck you, I'm gonna play Dungeons and Dragons. Well, fuck you, I'm going to make this violent video game. I'm gonna make Night Trap. I'm gonna make Doom. I'm gonna make whatever, and I don't care what you say.
Yep, yep,
But
yep,
there's probably like those pressures still exist, and there are probably going to be developers who are like, you know what, I don't. I'm scared. Though these people, they're in some cases using really bad tactics to go after developers that they don't like in some cases, and I also just don't want to deal with the massive backlash. And my company, my boss, doesn't want to deal with the massive backlash. So we're going to play it safe, and we're not going to pursue our full artistic vision as we intended, and we're not going to be able to create the product that we wanted to create. And isn't that like bad if that happens? And is that happening? I mean, I think it is.
Oh yeah, of course. It definitely, of course it's happening. It's happening all the time. I mean, you have to remember again, if you look closely at the picture, it doesn't boil down to any one person, any one thing, or any one product. It boils down to the bottom line. What is the bottom line? The bottom line is money. When it comes to making money, especially when media is concerned, where artistic freedom is concerned, there is a line. And the line is when your boss says, I don't want to deal with this crap, or a designer says, no, I'm not painting a naked picture of a woman for a material or texture for this model. They're not thinking, it doesn't matter whether you like porn or not. It doesn't matter whether you like a character with huge tits or not. That's not it. Nobody cares what you think. What people care about is two things: the end product, whether it's for them or whether it offends them. So when you go through history and you look at paintings, you look at books, you look at TV programs, you look at movies, everything. Forget about censorship. Let's not talk about censorship because that's a whole different ballgame. Again, we can go for hours talking about censorship. But if you look at the creation of media and the expression, the artistic expression of anything related to do with media, there's always a line, there's always a cautionary tale, and there's always those who would prefer to recognize where the line is, because usually the line is long from their media to their bank account, and then determine how far they want to go with it. And when you end up in a position where the expression of your artistic freedom relies on a third party, it's absolutely very difficult to not toe the line or to not realize where the line is. Because again, your boss says no, you do it, you're going to get fired. Your publisher says no, you do it, you're going to lose your publishing deal. There's always a line, and regardless of whether the line leads to your bank account or to your net worth or to the progress of your artwork, there's always that line. It's not an invisible line. It's not a line. It's not a demarcation line. It's a line that gets tugged at and can get tugged at any moment in time by anyone. And if you have 10 people tugging that line, you have no choice but to change. Nobody cares about your artistic freedom. Nobody cares about what you like and what you don't like if you are catering to an audience. Because at the end of the day, the audience rules and the audience matters. It's the difference between indie games, double A games, and triple A games. You find your audience. Right now, there's certain games you can't put on Steam. Well, do you want access to Steam's massive millions and millions of gamers? Or do you want to make a game for 10 of your dumb buddies who have been pushing you to make that particular game for 10 of them? These are decisions you get to make. And listen, nobody can tell me otherwise. Every single decision related to what people can and cannot do when it comes to art form and artistic freedom, if you look closely, there's money involved, always and every time. And that's where the line is.
Can I ask a very quick follow up?
Of course.
I don't think these things are neutral. I think, and maybe from a development standpoint, you could see it that way as an individual developer. But as someone who like cares about the games industry, and you do too, of course, you care, I care about the games industry. I want a wide variety of games to be made. I want games to be made that I don't care about and that I'll never play and that I'll never buy and that I think are stupid and offensive even possibly. I want all of it to exist because I think that that's a better industry for everybody. It's a better industry for myself. It's a better industry for everybody. It's a better industry for the woke people. It's a better industry for the conservatives. It's a better industry for everybody if we allow and if we create an atmosphere and an environment where where we promote artistic freedom, and where when these mobs come, people stand up to them and they say no, regardless of what side they're on, whether they're conservatives trying to censor games or try to change artistic elements of games, or whether it's woke people trying to do it. I think that people should stand up for what's right and stand up for the principle, and that leads to a better gaming industry for everybody. One, do you think that that's true about the standing up? And two, what do we do to create, if you believe this, like I do, what do we do to create the industry that's going to result in greater diversity, real diversity of games?
Well, I agree with you. I agree with all of that. And I say that because I've always found that in certain ways I don't fit in within the industry norms. So you probably know this. I've never worked for any game industry, for any publisher, studio, distributor ever. I've never done it. I'm one of very few developers who, from the old guard, who's never ever done it. I've never actually done a resume since I entered the game industry. That's late '80s. So I know what it's like to make your own road, to make your own games, do your own thing. I mean, I'm the guy who had the biggest failure. Well, before Daikatana, I had the biggest failure, in the '90s, and that's followed me for quite a while. But that made me stronger. But in saying that, however, I do understand that it's good for the industry to have an eclectic group of people, a diverse group of people, products, games, and gamers, because that is the culture. By the same token, you have to remember that in every society, there are the people who pull the strings. They're the people who have the money bags. They're the people who call the shots. There's a reason why you can have, you know, indie developers who can live on a game with 100 sales per month, and those who couldn't even pay the studio bills on 1,000 game sales per month. So when you're talking about we would like to have an industry that has all these things, I also wanted a pony. That's the way I look at it. I figure that if I continue to make the games that I want to make, my friends make the games that they want to make, and they're making the games either by themselves or for a publisher. Obviously, they have to go by what, well, it's again, there's money involved, so there's always trends involved. But when you look at it, you can have 100 games, 100 different kind of games, and as we know, about 80% of games don't make any money anyway. But the games are there. Would I love to have more diversity in the type of games being made? Of course. But again, I also wanted a pony. I mean, you can go to Steam right now. I mean, I'm sure you're one of the gamers who has a massive number of games in your Steam library and never played any of them.
True.
And that's the context of saying it's nice to have all these things, but having all these things doesn't mean all these things are good. And to have all these things be good, somebody or something has to give. There's always going to be, you can make 100, you know, FPS games and have 80% of those FPS games all fail. So what is it? Is it good enough that we have 100 FPS games and 80 fail, or is it good that we have, you know, 20 FPS games and only 18 fail? You see, it's the context of numbers. So for me, I like the diversity. I like that we can have different kind of games. I like that we can make the games that we want to make. I also like the fact that there are those who hold the money and who pull the strings and who make these calls that control those things. And those are just the things that, we have no control over. So for me, in conclude what I'm saying, for me, I think the way to do that is the way things are right now. If you make a good FPS game, a bunch of people are going to make good FPS games because the FPS games sell. And what's going to happen is you see board games are a big thing now. So you can make board games, you can make FPS games, you can make adventure games, you can make, RTS games. We have all these eclectic games, and most of them fail. But the diversity is there, the eclectic nature is there. Just because a lot of people don't get exposed to them doesn't mean they don't exist. They do exist. And I think that as time moves on, it's going to get even more and more diverse, a lot more eclectic, because that's how, because there are a lot more ideas coming along. And for instance, Web3 is a big thing coming out. We had AR, we have VR. So all these different technologies, all these different genres are where different diverse games and experiences come from. So I think we're there. I think we're actually there right now. We were there before, but not to the extent that we are now. So I think it's more, I think we should focus more on how we promote what we have and nurture what we have so that they get bigger. So that when those things get bigger, the guys who make these big things stick around to make bigger and better things rather than saying, hey, well, I just spent $5 million in this game and I've lost all my money. I've just made this FPS game. Now I'm going to go make an adventure game. What about the people who are already making adventure games? There's a lot of leapfrogging going on there. But I think that eclectic and diverse nature of games has always been there if you know where to look.
Well, thank you so much, Derek, for coming on. I want to ask, is there anything else you want to talk about? Over voice.
Oh, no, not really. Just that, gaming is the lifeblood of, our culture. And I think that a lot of the times gamers get a bad rap. But, again, me being a gamer first and foremost and being a game dev second, I'm able to draw the line and know where that line is. And I know that, how to speak on behalf of as a game developer or as a gamer. But a lot of the times, I think people tend to think that there's just because you're a game dev, you're in it for the money and all the other things, and they keep forgetting that a lot of us game devs started out as gamers. So I think gamers need to understand their game devs better, and game devs need to take the time to understand their gamers better. And I think the more things change, the better they can get. I mean, I'm 60 now, so I'm not going to be around for our current generation of gamers and game devs. But I'm hoping that the legacy we leave behind is a legacy that ends up making things all that much better since we are not there yet because our generation just started out too late.
Well, thanks again, Derek. And if you want to check out Derek's full interview, check out the book because he's doing a text interview as well. And thanks for watching, everybody, and have a good night. I'll go ahead and close her down.